You have to be very fit and dedicate a lot of your time to the activity side of things in order to burn it off. That's not to say it's not important to maximize activity. I think it does help. But bear in mind, actually, if we only were able to do one thing, controlling intake is absolutely vital. So what do we do? Well, it's actually not so much specific types of food. There are certain foods which are less in calories, lower in calories, and that can potentially be easy or easier. But if anything, it doesn't matter too much what you feed, I guess, as long as it's balanced and appropriate for your pet. It's actually how you feed it which is important. This comes down to what I term calorie awareness, and this is something again that every pet owner ideally should need. So what does it mean? It means we need to be aware of how many calories approximately our pet needs. We can do that by trial and error, and I'll come on to that in due course. We therefore need to know that each day they get the same number of calories. So when we're talking about the food, the normal daily ration, particularly if it's a dry food, which is very energy dense, it's important that we measure out the food accurately and try to keep it to the right amount each day. Be very aware also of portion size. We tend to think of ourselves when we're imagining, if we think about giving an extra a treat, we think, oh, it's only a little bit of whatever. But I'll just emphasize the fact that portion size misleads us. And in particular, not wrong necessarily to be treating your pet. In fact, that's very good for the bond. But just be aware that anything that's a food reward is essentially energy. It contributes to the daily calorie intake, and often quite significantly. So you need to take it into account in that overall daily ration. You can't just go giving it on top and not expect the weight to gain. So be very careful about treating. So first things first, I'm not a fan of using measuring cups, I'm afraid. Many people, in fact, most people probably use some sort of measuring cup if they're using dry food or even just a handful of food and don't think about it. We've done a study recently which shows that measuring cups are completely inaccurate, and I'll show you some information on that study in a moment. So my way, I prefer to ban these if at all possible. I don't think they're a useful or helpful thing when it comes to trying to prevent weight gain. What are the problems? Well, first things first, depending on the cup, the lines on the cup are not accurate. They're not what they say they are. So if you actually look at the portion and weigh it out on scales, it's not often the same, isn't it? It depends on the cup, but some of them are not accurate. Number two, the same person, if you weigh out 10 different portions, does not weigh the amount out. And let me tell you, almost invariably, if there's inaccuracy, it's too many calories. And that can go up to 40, 50% more than the portion that person thinks they're weighing out. And this may not matter quite so much for a very active big dog. However, for small dogs and cats, that can be absolutely a little error in a cup makes a massive, massive difference on the scales. And the other thing, more often than not, is you've got some cup, maybe from a different food, you've changed the food, so you're using an old cup, or you've lost the cup, so you just use any utensil you've got and think it's going to be the same, or as I say, just take a handful. You have no idea how much you're feeding in those times. And let me tell you, it's small excesses over time, and this is one of the key things I think that helps to contribute to gain. So what do we do instead? It takes a bit longer, but I would recommend weighing out food in an accurate way. And your best way of doing this is on kitchen scales, where you can be much, much more precise. I told you about sort of calorie awareness. We frequently underestimate real calorie intake, particularly with treats and extras. And so this is something we've got to be very careful. So just a few examples which help to illustrate this issue. Here, let's imagine, we want to give our cat a treat. Let's give him him or her a tin of tuna. The equivalent human portion of a tin of tuna, of course, would be 7 tins of tuna. So imagine that. Would we ever ourselves eat 7 tins of tuna? Probably not. Let's imagine we want to give our cat a saucer of milk. That's the same as drinking a pint and a half of milk. Or we've had a Chinese. This is a little bit of crispy duck with some lovely plum sauce, just a couple of morsels. What harm could that do? Many people say. Well, that's like eating over half a duck. So again, if you're happy eating half a duck, that's absolutely fine, but do bear in mind that's what you're giving your cat when you're giving what you think is a small bit of food. And just one more example, these are actually all real examples of what people feed at our clinic. 1 pork scratching is the same as eating 4 bags of pork scratchings. So it may not seem a lot to you, but it can be a considerable amount of extra intake, particularly for small dogs and for cats. But again, any dog essentially has the potential of being fed too much. So do bear in mind the implications of giving those extras, which really, to be honest, are often unbalanced food. They're often high in salt, high in fat, and therefore may not be the best thing to do. Let's just finish up last couple of minutes and talk about the other side. Remember, the calorie control and calorie awareness and intake is vital, but it's also about expending energy. This slide always just amuses me. You're going to go to a fitness center, but why would someone designing a fitness center ever put escalators in front? Just, who knows? Only in America. Anyway, let's just talk a little bit about why we'd want to do exercise. Well, there are a number of benefits. It does burn calories, as I've said, but remember the effect of that is quite modest on energy balance unless you do lots of activity and exercise. It does make a difference and it's important, but there are some other benefits which I think really are good for good pet ownership. Your pets generally enjoy it, so it's a positive reward. If we're having to control calorie intake and cut back on those treats, then this is a positive thing we can do. It's going to strengthen the bond with your pet, so it's really, really good for that. You know, there's no reason when we're giving rewards we shouldn't make use of play activity and sort of exercise in other ways. It maintains lean tissue mass. That maximizes your basal metabolic rate and therefore helps to burn calories, so it's very good for that. And of course, if we're going to walk along with our pets, then it's very good for us. And we've done some studies actually at Liverpool looking at that influence, and dog owners do spend a significant amount of their time and their activity walking with their dog. So it's got to have some sort of benefit, not just for the pet. If you're a dog, then typically it's going to be lead walking, and it's best to try to keep a regular amount each day, and not just sort of doing lots at the weekend and nothing during the weekdays. However, there's various other things. Some dogs like agility. Play activity, very, very good. We have obviously many dogs, as I've shown you, can have lameness associated with their extra weight. And for those, what we often recommend is swimming, hydrotherapy. There are various hydrotherapy centres now for dogs. If you're a cat, well, most of these don't apply. You don't have agility cats. We rarely take cats for walks, and cats generally don't like water quite so much in terms of swimming. So really what we need to do is think about using various ways of stimulating activity for cats. And this is usually play activity, various types of cat toy. So you can use little sort of round ones. You can even just bits of paper can work. These long sort of fishing rod ones work very, very well because they can move rapidly and they can stimulate that activity. Bear in mind, dogs are different from cats here. Dogs you could take for a long walk, that's fine. In the wild, cats are used to short, rapid bursts of activity. So you're better limiting a play session than a cat, really to a minute or two at a time, and if possible doing that sort of 3 or 4 times a day rather than trying to have one long 10-15 minute session. Cats also get very bored rapidly with different toys, so you need to ring the changes in the type of toys you've got. And of course, if you don't like to do that, then there are actually now electronic devices and electronic fishing toys, as you can see, which do the job for you. So no reason why you couldn't in any way get some sort of activity in that pet. Okay, now let's just finish up. I've talked about calorie intake and activity, but I made the point that we need to be aware of what our energy balance is in our pet. Now that can be very, very variable. So there are equations we can use to work out what the sort of typical calorie requirement is for a dog or cat, but it can vary 50% either way. So in practice, it's much better to do the opposite, which is keep a regular check on body weight. If the body weight's going up, you know you're feeding too much. If body weight's going down, you know you're not feeding enough. It's almost as simple as that, and that trial and error approach is very rarely wrong. So we need to get into the habit of keeping regular checks of body weight and doing this condition scoring that I mentioned, excuse me for a bit of a computer issue, the condition scoring I was talking about, where we're just checking on that condition, because as long as we know our pet's in ideal weight at that particular weight, then we can make sure the two stay in check. So what do I recommend? Well, what I would say is start this process young. So ideally we need to start the process in a growing puppy or